My great-grandmother's name is Mary Nari Zaibek Kawod. She was born in 1914 in the city of Nazareth, in Palestine, which is present-day Israel. At a young age, she moved to the city of Ramallah, the city that her mother's family was from. At that time, Ramallah was undisputedly in the country of Palestine. Today, Ramallah serves as the administrative capital of the Palestinian National Authority. It is in the area known as the West Bank, which is recognized as the State of Palestine by 137 of the 193 United Nations member states, though the United States does not recognize it as a sovereign state. Ramallah has a long, rich history dating back to the year 1550. Ramallah was originally called Rum, the Aramaic word for hill, and after Arabs entered the city, Allah, the Arabic word for God, was added, so Ramallah translates to Hill of God. The story goes that around the year 1550, a small Christian tribe called Hadadin was living in southern Jordan, in the vicinity of Karak, about 60 miles southeast of Ramallah. The head of this tribe was Rashed Hadadin. One day, Sheikh Ibn Qasim, the head of a large Islamic tribe, went to visit Rashed Hadadin and the Christian tribe. During this meeting, someone came into the marifet, or hospitality room, where the two tribal leaders were enjoying coffee. The news was that the Christian, Rashed Hadadin, had just become a father to a baby girl. Sheikh Ibn Qasim decided to ask for the girl's hand in marriage to his son, to which Hadadin agreed. 12 years later, Ibn Qasim returned for Hadadin's daughter, but Hadadin did not want to give her away, as he was Christian and Ibn Qasim was a Muslim. This response angered Ibn Qasim, who warned Hadadin to honor the deepest of Arab traditions, to fulfill his promise. Thinking quickly, Hadadin responded with a request for some time to prepare the bride. With help from Tamash Tawil, a member of a smaller Muslim tribe in Karak, they used this time to flee the area with their families. As the story goes, they crossed the Dead Sea via a shallow area called Makadid al-Isam. Once they had crossed, they planted scythes, spears, and swords. Ibn Qasim did not learn what had happened until the next morning and was unable to reach them. The two families settled in the area that became known as Ramallah. Hadadin had 5 sons, the oldest of which, Sabra, also had 5 sons. His sons, Yosef, Awad, Isa, Khalid, and Aziz, received equal parts of the land they settled in Ramallah. My great-grandmother would, hundreds of years later, marry a descendant of Khalid. A 1562 census of the area showed that there were 63 Christian families, 8 single Christian men, and 8 Muslim families living in Ramallah. Although the population is now over 90% Muslim, with only about 2% Christian, this explains how my family is one of the few Palestinian Christians. Mary's story begins with her parents, Jalila Harb and Nasri Zaibek. Jalila was born in Ramallah on January 15, 1892. Nasri Zaibek was born in September 1890 in Nazareth, Palestine. Nasri and Jalila married in February 1911, and just a few months later, Jalila was pregnant with their first child, Mary. Mary was born either August 14th, September 12th, or September 14th in the year 1914. She lived most of the first 15 years of her life in Ramallah. There, she attended the Ramallah Friends School, a private girls' school founded by American Quakers in 1869. She learned English at the school, so she became fluent in both Arabic and English. Mary had 2 sisters, Naaman or Nancy, who was born in 1918, and Yasmin or Jasmine, who was born in 1920. She also had 2 brothers, both of whom were born in the United States. Raj or Roger was born in 1929, and Thomas was born in 1931. A lot of information was found that reveals that Mary's family was relatively wealthy. Her father's father supposedly owned a store in Palestine. All other sources of income for the family in Palestine are unknown, but they did have enough money for Nasri to travel to the United States with about $5,000, and for all 3 of his daughters to attend the Ramallah Friends School, a prestigious school that is now one of the most expensive schools in Palestine. Nasri left his wife and daughters to travel to the United States in 1920. He sailed on a French steamliner, the SS La Lorraine, with his brother-in-law William Harb. They left from Havre, France, and arrived in New York on October 12, 1920. Nasri purchased a $5,000 house in Southampton upon arriving in New York, which was a pretty large sum of money at that time. They lived at 75 David White's Lane. Nasri worked as a salesman and invested in property to earn money, and William was a boarder living with Nasri. Back in Palestine, Jalila cared for her 3 daughters, Mary, Nancy, and Jasmine, on her own until 1928, when they came to the United States to meet Nasri and William. They came on the French ship SS Sanaya on a journey which took 30 days. They left on February 12, 1928, from Haifa, a now Israeli city around 40 miles east of Ramallah. The list or manifest of alien passengers for the United States indicates that Jalila was 36 at time of departure and an illiterate housewife. Mary and her sisters, 9-year-old Nancy and 7-year-old Jasmine, could all read and write, with Arabic listed as their language, though they would have known at least some English as well. They were all served at Jerusalem for their immigration visas. They were met by Nasri in Rhode Island upon arriving in the United States, and then traveled to their house in Southampton. As the oldest child, Mary had to help care for the household and for her siblings. One of her responsibilities was to fill the potbelly stove with coal in the mornings to ensure the house was warm for her family. She attended Southampton High School when she first arrived in the United States, but had to drop out so that she could go to work as a door-to-door salesperson with her father. When Mary was 18 years old, she met the father of Deborah Kawod. Their families had known each other in Palestine, and he liked Mary, so he decided to introduce her to his son. Deborah was a few years older than Mary, born on May 10, 1910. He had gone to the Friends Boys' School, so like Mary, he was fluent in English. When he was about 14 or 15 years old, he left school in Ramallah to come to the United States, where he immediately began working to help support his family. Mary and Deborah reconnected in the United States and were married on June 18, 1933, when Mary was 18 years old and Deborah was 24 years old. They moved to Pembroke Street in the town that was then referred to as East Hempstead and is now called Uniondale. When she was 19 years old, Mary gave birth to their first daughter, Alice. She had 4 children: Alice, my grandmother Ruth, Wadad or Jeannie, and Joseph. Mary was a good mother to her children. Her oldest daughter, Alice, and middle daughter, Ruth, recall some fond memories with her.
One thing about Tete, which my mom, right, is that she always thought of the kids before she thought of herself. That was one thing, that she always thought of her children before she thought of herself. She always made sure that we were happy, and one thing that I remember though was every Sunday she would go get the paper, and then she would say, "What do you want? What kind of what do you want? What kind of donuts do you want? What kind? Do you want eclairs from the bakery?" She would go to the bakery and say, "What do you feel like having?" And everybody had a choice, and they would get whatever they wanted. That was like a ritual every Sunday.
As was standard of the times, Mary stayed home to care for the children, and Deborah earned money for the family. He was a salesman and sold linens and orientals that were handmade from China. Much of his business took place in Southampton, where his biggest customers included wealthy families and convents. He would have been registered for the draft that was implemented in 1940, but did not go to war because he had a young child and Mary was pregnant. Instead, he went to work for the Republic Aviation Corporation, aiding the war effort by working on planes. After the war, Deborah continued his job as a salesman until he died at the age of 40 in August 1951. My great-aunt Alice, who was around 14 years old at the time, remembers her father outside talking to a neighbor. As he walked back home, she recalls him falling down on the sidewalk out front of their house. She screamed to her mother, who was doing the dishes, and Mary rushed outside to see if he was okay. Alice stayed inside, but her mother told her that she begged Deborah to get up. His last words to his wife, in Arabic, were "Don't scare the children." He had had a heart attack and passed away there in front of the house. Alice remembers the period following her father's death to be difficult for her, but mostly for her mother. For 6 months, Mary would sit outside, mourning her loss. She had trouble caring for the house and for her children. However, as Alice recalls, one day Deborah appeared to her with God, a figure she described as a man dressed all in white with a long white beard and a staff, in a dream. He told her to move on, that she had to care for the children and fulfill her responsibilities. The next day, it was like she was a whole new person. She went back to prioritizing her children. She cared for them and even taught herself to drive so she could take them places.
My father passed away, and in those days women weren't supposed to drive, so she didn't know how to drive, but he had a new car. So she got in the car, turned the key, and taught herself how to drive us all over the place. That was a very favorite. So we got a chance to go to the ice cream and all kinds of places with her.
She attempted to take over her husband's clients from his sales job, but many of his clients were based in the Hamptons and she wanted to focus on her children rather than the business. From then on, she relied on savings and government aid to be a full-time mother and homemaker. When her children were old enough, they went to work and helped contribute to the household. Family was always important to Mary, as was her heritage. Her immediate family had all come with her to the United States, so she had only extended family in Palestine, who she did not keep in contact with. Even so, it must have been tough for her to think about the Arab-Israeli war. Her home, the place where she spent her childhood, was in the middle of a violent conflict. Though she was not directly involved with the PLO, or Palestinian Liberation Organization, my mother recalls joining in on a few protests and marches with her grandmother Mary. She was not a member of the organization, but marched peacefully to protest the Israeli-Palestinian conflicts and protect her homeland. The marches she participated in took place during Ramallah conventions. Mary loved going to these conventions with her family, where she could spend time with and enjoy activities with other people from Ramallah. I imagine these conventions were especially exciting for her since she had spent time in Ramallah, whereas her children and grandchildren, who also attended, had not. Mary probably knew of the other people in attendance, or their families, and could truly enjoy the time spent reconnecting and having fun with them. Mary also found a community of friends in her church, St. John Orthodox Church, which was in Uniondale at the time but has since moved to Levittown, New York. My mother recalls Mary picking her up to take her to church on Sunday mornings. They would go to Mass and then socialize during the coffee hour following Mass. They would also attend church dances together. Mary moved in with her daughter Ruth when my mother was young. She lived with them until around 1983, when she moved in with her oldest daughter, Alice. Alice's husband passed away at this time, and Mary did not want her to be alone. My mother recalls having a particularly special relationship with her grandmother. Before she moved in with my mother's family, my mom recalls having Mary braid her hair in the evenings. Then, when it was messed up in the mornings, my mother would have to drag her mom down the block to Mary's house so that her hair could be redone. My mother would also leave school early, claiming to be sick because she knew that her mother and grandmother were together and she was jealous. They would pick her up and she would join them for pastries at a coffee shop on Franklin Avenue in Garden City. Mary was a happy, funny woman. She enjoyed people watching, playing cards, and crocheting. She taught my mother to crochet, who then taught me. Mary was also known for switching between speaking Arabic and speaking English, sometimes in the same sentence. The result is 3 generations of Kawod descendants who have been known to say Arabic words without realizing that they're Arabic words, thus eliciting questioning looks from others. Mary lived to see all of her children get married and met 4 of her great-grandchildren. She passed away of natural causes on January 20th, 2000. Though she may be gone, her legacy lives on through all she taught to her children and grandchildren, skills and values which have been passed on to each generation.
Shukran. Shukran is thank you.